Hi, I'm Brad, and this is my first video in a channel I'm going to call Brad's Vintage Collection. I started collecting cards in 1978 when I was only 6 years old. I was buying packs of cards at the local convenience store. As a huge Cub fan, my goal was to get the Bruce Sutter and the Dave Kingman from that set. Here are my pack pulled 1978 Bruce Sutter and Dave Kingman cards. These were the cards I was going for in opening the packs, and when I finally got Kingman, it's when I stopped buying cards in 1978. But look at that amazing Topps airbrush job on the Kingman. Obviously, he was in a Mets uniform, and they made him a Cub, and it's classic Topps airbrushing. My collecting focus changed in 1982 because the library got in a book called The Official Baseball Card Price Guide, and I checked it out of the library and studied the cards that I had and saw that some were more expensive, and I surmised that those players must be the stars of the game. So at 10 years old, I memorized who all the stars were, but I was more intrigued by looking back in the book and seeing all the old cards that were out there, going back into the early 70s, the 60s, the 50s, and even way before that. And I was like, wow, it would be great to own some of those cards someday. And then at school, I learned that there were two antique stores that had vintage baseball cards. And so I went to a place called A Bit of Yesterday and a place called Ye Old Country Store, which were two antique stores in my hometown. And both of them had vintage cards. So this 69 Carlton and this 62 Frank Robinson All-Star were my first two vintage cards. They were bought at A Bit of Yesterday. I think I paid $1 for the Carlton and $2 for the Frank Robinson. And you can see they're pretty rough. And that was the vintage cards I had access to until I started going to card shows. But that 62 Robinson was the oldest card in my collection for quite a while. And it was years before I bought anything in the 50s and anything even in 61 or 60. So that was my oldest card in my collection. So the first card in my binder for a good long time. Then in 1983, the Old Country Store put up a poster that said, "Baseball Card Show, Hillside Holiday Inn." And that was an exciting moment for me. I didn't know baseball card shows existed. And I talked to my dad, and he drove by the Old Country Store to write down like where it was. And then as a family, we went to the card show. My brother collected too. He was 4 years younger, so he got into vintage at a very, very young age. But at 11 years old, I went to my first card show, and I was just overwhelmed. I couldn't believe all of the cards that were there. I saw my first tobacco cards there. I saw probably my first 50s cards there, and was just, I don't remember what I got at that first show, or even if I got anything, but I remember my dad and us going around and talking to all the dealers, and we learned for the first time about condition. My dad was a coin collector, so he was really used to looking at things very closely to determine which one was better than another. And so as we learned about condition, he helped teach us that what cards looked like, and that this one was better than that, and that really you should try to find the best cards you could. And that was kind of how we collected growing up, trying to find the best cards we could. In 1989, at the age of 16, the National came to Chicago, and that was just an unbelievable experience, being able to go to a National. I remember almost clearing out my bank account and having the most money I ever had in my life in my possession when I went to that show. And at that time, I was still trying to fill in 80 on all of the stars from those sets, so I filled in a lot of those cards. But I also looked at a lot of vintage, and for me, I know the cards I bought at that show were in the 70s and 60s. I didn't really have the funds to go back to the 50s yet. In the 1989 National, these were my two big vintage cards. The 75 Yount was my oldest rookie card for a really long time in my collection, and I wanted to get a Reggie card in the A's, and I just loved that 1970 Reggie Jackson, the young look and the way he's swinging the bat, and it was probably my favorite card in my collection for a couple of years after that National. I mean, I just really, really love that Reggie card, and I still have not upgraded either of these. These are my keeper cards as my 70 Jackson representative and my 75 Yount representative in my collection still today. So the 55 Banks I bought at my second national, I think it was 1994. And the 58 World Series batting foes was a card that I was looking for years and years and years. And I would go to every CSCA show and I'd ask every dealer if they had one. And they got to know me. And when I'd come up to the table, they'd say, no, I don't have a World Series batting foes. And one show, all of a sudden, someone had gotten one. And these were my favorite two cards from my childhood collection, my collection through college, and love both of these cards. The 55 Banks, I have a whole Banks run now, and that's my representative of the 55. And the World Series batting foes is still one of my favorite cards in the collection. And I remember shaking as I took the money out to buy that World Series batting foes card. It was one I thought I'd never find. I even went through a whole national looking for the right one and didn't find it. So really excited to still have these two cards. And these were the cornerstone of my collection before eventually having to move into graded cards. So I resisted graded cards as long as I could. I really liked being able to take the cards out and look at them and smell them and look at them out of the case every once in a while. And I was going to card shows and buying less and less cards. And I remember there was a big card show in Chicago once a year, later twice a year, called the Sun Times show. They still have it. They have a different name for it now. But I went to the Sun Times show and I'd saved up a decent amount of money, and I went through, and the only cards I bought were these two. And when I got home, they were both nice cards, but they weren't the nicest cards. And what had happened is the cards in the conditions that I tried to get were generally graded now. And I probably took a good 2 years out of the hobby where I just wasn't sure what to do. I'd go to shows from time to time. I'd buy maybe one card. And I really was close to getting out of the hobby. And then I just decided, you know what, I'm going to go and buy some of the graded cards, because the cards of the condition I like are almost always graded now. And I have two choices. Either I can stop collecting what I love, and the hobby had been a big part of my life for a long time, or I could move into graded. And so I finally, in 2011, decided to start collecting graded cards as well as raw. So this is my first graded card, a 1949 Lou Boudreau, and it was bought in 2011. And this kind of opened the floodgates for graded cards. It was an eBay purchase, and I wanted to get a Lou Boudreau card, and now I have all but one of his, because he was the Cubs color man growing up, and he also played baseball at U of I, where I went to college. So for me, getting this Boudreau card was something that I really thought was cool. And when I saw it on eBay, I'm like, okay, I'm sick of not being into cards. This card's beautiful, and I'm going to go ahead and buy my first graded card. And then from that point on in 2011, I've been really, really strong into the hobby again, after taking a couple years off because of not really wanting to buy slab cards and not be able to hold them. So really glad I got back in, and I've had a ton of fun since then, and this was kind of the card that started it for me. And then the last card I'm going to show in this first video is my favorite card in my collection. As a Cub fan, I don't remember how old I was when I found out this card existed, but I was like, wow, it would be incredible to have this card one day. And this card has Tinker, Evers, and Chance. So the famous Cubs double play combination, the last World Series championship before 2016, and they were so entwined together that they were actually inducted into the Hall of Fame together. And there's a famous poem about Tinker, Evers, and Chance that I love. And if you've seen Ken Burns' Baseball, I'm sure you've heard it. But really, when I saw this card in an auction catalog, and I just took my breath away, and I bid a bid that was hopefully something that was going to win it. And I do auctions different than most people. I put in my best bid, and it's either going to get it or it's not. And this one got it. So It's my favorite card in my collection. Couldn't be happier to have it, and excited to share this with you today, as it's something I'm very proud of. So I hope you enjoyed looking at some of the cards from my collection. I plan on making future videos kind of showing off some of the things I have and why I bought them, and kind of the stories for how I picked out the cards that I have. Talking about some things that are going on in the hobby, and also kind of giving some knowledge and tips that I have on vintage cards since I've been collecting for a long time. But the real reason that I want to make this channel is to make more friends in the hobby. I've met some of the YouTube content creators at the Nationals the last few years, and they're outstanding people, and I've got some encouragement from a number of them to start making videos. So after going to the National a couple weeks ago, this is my first video, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you'll tune in to future videos on my channel. Thank you for watching.